Okay, so today is part 3 of the book of Joshua. We'll be doing chapters 14 through 19. And I hope you've been reading. This time, what we will be discussing is the dividing of the land from the west side of the Jordan. Remember that the last time we talked, they were talking about the tribes of Reuben, Manasseh and Gad, half of the tribe of Manasseh, they were on the east side of the Jordan. So now they're going to start distributing the west side of the Jordan. So if you go to chapter 14, please. And remember, we'll be just reading a few verses. If you read, you know that there's a lot of names of cities and towns. So we probably won't be going over each one of them. You might want to just read it tonight when you can't sleep. It'll probably help you. There's a lot of words, a lot of new names and things. Okay, so let's go to chapter 14 of Joshua. And it says, "Now these are the territories which the sons of Israel inherited in the land of Canaan, which Eleazar the priest and Joshua the son of Nun and the heads of the households of the tribes of the sons of Israel apportioned to them for inheritance, by the lot of their inheritance, as Yahweh commanded through Moses, for the 9 tribes and the half tribes." So we have Eleazar, who's the high priest, who's the son of Aaron, one of the sons of Aaron. And then we have Joshua, who's the leader. And then we have also the heads of the households, because remember, they have to give the land based on authority and based on tribes and the heads of the tribes. So it says in verse 3, "For Moses had given the inheritance of the 2 tribes and the half tribe beyond the Jordan, but he did not give an inheritance to the Levites among them. For the sons of Joseph were 2 tribes, Manasseh and Ephraim, and they did not give a portion to the Levites in the land, except cities to live in, with their pasture lands for their livestock and for their property. Thus the sons of Israel did just as the Lord had commanded Moses, and they divided the land." So the only people that are not getting a portion of land are the Levites. Okay, they're not getting land as inheritance because the Lord is their inheritance. So what's happening is that everybody, what they do is that every tribe sets aside some land for the Levite to live in, to have their home and their animals and their pasture for their animals, and to grow certain fruits and things, but the land itself is not theirs. So they kind of allow them to live within their properties, but they really don't have land as an inheritance. Now it had to be that every tribe, every region of tribes, remember they're divided into 12 regions based on the tribes. So for every region there had to be a Levite, at least one Levite family. It could have been more, but usually at least one. Why? Because within that region, they would give the tithe to that Levite, and they would also, for prayers, or if there was any sickness or somebody had any skin issues, it would be the priest that would take care of those things. Okay, so every tribe had basically at least a family of Levites. Now, as for the sons of Joseph, it says, remember they were divided into 2 tribes, Manasseh and Ephraim, because Jacob, when he was giving the blessing, he adopted Manasseh and Ephraim as his sons. They were legally adopted, therefore they're getting inheritance in the name of Joseph. Okay. Now, verse 6 of chapter 14, it says, "Then the sons of Judah drew near to Joshua in the Gilgal, and Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, said to him, 'You know the word which the Lord spoke to Moses, the man of God, concerning you and me in Kadesh Barnea. I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land, and I brought word back to him as it was in my heart. Nevertheless, my brethren who went up with me made the heart of the people melt with fear. But I followed the Lord my God fully.'" Remember when Moses sent out the spies, that the only 2 that came with a good report was Caleb and Joshua. So during that time, Moses promised Caleb that he would get a good inheritance. Verse 9. So Moses swore on that day, saying, surely the land on which your foot has trodden will be an inheritance to you and to your children forever, because you have followed the Lord my God fully. So the heart of if the heart of Joshua and Caleb were completely devoted to the Lord. That's why when they came from spying the land, they gave a good report. Verse 10, now behold, the Lord has let me live just as he spoke these 45 years from the time that the Lord spoke this word to Moses when Israel walked in the wilderness. And now behold, I am 85 years old. Yeah. So he waited 45 years to get his inheritance from the moment that they spied out the land. Verse 11, this is what he says. It says, I am still as strong today as I was in the day Moses sent me. As my strength was then, so my strength is now, for war and for going out and coming in. Now then give me this hill country about which the Lord spoke on that day, for you heard on that day that Anakim were there with great fortified cities. Perhaps the Lord will be with me, and I will drive them out as the Lord has spoken. So the land that is going to belong to Caleb is a land that also had Anakim living there. Remember last time we spoke that these were individuals that were very tall, approximately average height was 9 feet tall, and some of them even had 6 fingers on their hands and toes. So by those characteristics, I assume that it's a genetic syndrome. There's the only way that that can happen. Okay, so it doesn't mean they were anything strange. They were just very tall people. Most likely was a genetic syndrome. So he says, maybe the Lord will give me strength to get them rid them out of the land, because now this land is going to be mine. Verse 13, so Joshua blessed him and gave Hebron to Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, for an inheritance. Therefore Hebron became the inheritance of Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, until this day, because he followed the Lord God of Israel fully. Now the name of Hebron was formerly Kiriath Arba, for Arba was the greatest man among the Anakim. Then the land had rest from war. So the first one to get land was Caleb. Remember Judah. He belonged to the tribe of Judah. So they start out with Judah giving out the land. Okay, now chapter 15. It says, now the lot for the tribe of the sons of Judah according to their families reached the border of and so. Here it gives you all the borders or the outlines of the region that was to belong to Judah. Now you can read all that and go to verse 8. Then the border went up the valley of Ben Hinnom to the slope of the Jebusite on the south, that is Jerusalem. That's to show you that in Jerusalem, before Jerusalem became part of Israel, the Jebusites lived there. Okay, the Jebusites are part of the Canaanites, so they lived there. Verse 13 of chapter 15. It says, now he gave to Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, a portion among the sons of Judah, according to the command of the Lord to Joshua, namely Kiriath Arba, Arba being the father of Anak, that is Hebron. Caleb drove out from there the 3 sons of Anak. So Anak had 3 sons, Shishai, Ahiman, and Talmai, the children of Anak. Then he went up from there against the inhabitants of Debir. Now the name of Debir formerly was Kiriath Sefer. And Caleb said, the one who attacks Kiriath Sefer and captures it, I will give him Achsah, my daughter, as a wife. Othniel, the son of Kenaz, the brother of Caleb, captured it, so he gave him Achsah, his daughter, as a wife. So this is to help him get rid of all these people. Joshua says as a reward, whoever captures this place, I will give them my daughter as a wife. And so we have that this guy, Othniel, is the one that captures it.
He's her uncle.
Yes. Who's her uncle?
He's the brother of
Kenaz. Kenaz is the uncle of the girl. He's her cousin. Verse 18, it came about that when she came to him, she persuaded him to ask her father for a field. Now remember that during this time, there were 2 things that had to happen. One was a bridal price, which was for him capturing the city. And number two, there was a dowry, which was something that the father gave to the daughter. So she goes to him, to her husband, her new husband, says, go to daddy and ask him to give you a field. Okay, we need a field, that's part of my dowry. So he goes and does that. But then she comes and she asks for something else. She says, it came about that when she came to him, she persuaded him to ask her father for a field. So she alighted from the donkey, and Caleb said to her, what do you want? Verse 19, chapter 15. Then she said, give me a blessing since you have given me the land of the Negev. Give me also springs of water. So he gave her the upper springs and the lower springs. So she got even more than the field. Because remember, the Negev is the southern part of Israel, which is pretty dry. It's most of the desert. So she's asking for springs, for water. She needs the water. Because if she's going to live there, she's going to need water for her animals and for any planting of trees and things that you need water to live, basically. So she got an extra gift. So it says in verse 20, this is the inheritance of the tribe of the sons of Judah according to their families. And then it talks about all the cities that were within the borders of Judah. And again, you can read that. And within Judah was the tribe that got the most land. In verse 33, it talks about the lowland. And within that lowland, there were 14 cities. And then if you go to verse 48, it says in the hill country. In the hill country, there are 11 cities, 9 cities, 10 cities, 6 cities, 2 cities. So this area was the biggest area was given to Judah. Verse 63 of chapter 15, it says, now as for the Jebusites, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the sons of Judah could not drive them out. So the Jebusites live with the sons of Judah at Jerusalem until this day. So that's one of the issues, problems that the people of Israel had when they were conquering the land, that in spite of some areas, they could not completely get rid of the inhabitants that lived there. And remember that the Lord wanted these inhabitants to leave because it had to do that these people were going to be a snare. They were going to contaminate the people of Israel. So in spite of, there were some people they could just not completely get rid of. Okay. So we have that the land that they're giving now is the land west of the Jordan. In chapter 14, we see that Caleb is the first one to get land. Then the tribe of Judah, which includes his part where Caleb also has land, because Caleb, remember, was from the tribe of Judah, and Joshua from the tribe of Ephraim. Okay. So chapter 16.
Caleb was saying some other tribes, not Caleb was a Gentile.
But he integrated into the tribe of Judah. He was considered already part of Judah. Remember that even you're grafted in, once you're grafted in, you are considered as a native. So there was no distinction. That's why Caleb is the first one to be mentioned. And Caleb was a person that was faithful to the Lord fully. He was rewarded by the Lord. So it has nothing to do with biology, genetical biology. It has to do with your heart, how your heart is dedicated to the Lord. And so he will reward you accordingly. And so Caleb was considered part of Judah. That's why his property was within the region of Judah.
What did you say about Caleb?
That he wasn't a native born Israeli, but he was considered part of Judah.
So he left Egypt with them?
Yes, he was already part of Judah, of Israel. Yeah. Chapter 16, then the lot for the sons of Joseph. Now chapter 16 has to do with the sons of Joseph. If you go to verse 4, it says, the sons of Joseph, Manasseh and Ephraim, received their inheritance. Now this was the territory of the sons of Ephraim according to their families. So when they start distributing the land for the sons of Joseph, they start with Ephraim. Why? Because Ephraim was given the firstborn right. Even though he was the younger brother, the younger son of Joseph, Jacob blessed him as the first son. So the land started being distributed, and they start with Ephraim. And it tells you all the inheritance, all the borders of the land. In verse,
Then Judah, Simeon don't become.
no, they get separate. In verse 9, it says, together with the cities which were set apart for the sons of Ephraim in the midst of the inheritance of the sons of Manasseh, all the cities were their villages. But they did not drive out the Canaanites who lived in Gezer, so the Canaanites live in the midst of Ephraim to this day, and they became forced laborers. So again, some of the people within this territory could not be driven out, and so as part of living, staying in the land, they became, in a way, forced labor. They worked for the Ephraimites. It was a way of taxation, because remember, taxes have been always. So a way of taxing them was forced labor, because they didn't leave. And another thing is, one of the things, if you look at the if you look at a map of Israel right now, what's called Samaria, the West Bank, is one of the richest fertile lands that the settlers, that the people that live there, I don't want to call them settlers because that's theirs, the people that live there is where we're getting all these produce of olives and wines and cheeses and goat milk and all these things that are happening, because it's a beautiful, beautiful part of the country. If you've been to the heartland of Israel, which is Samaria and the West Bank, is beautiful. And it sits high above, and the weather's awesome. They have a lot of animals, a lot of pastures, so these people are thriving there. And so these Canaanites, they want to give up that land, that because if then it was awesome, now it's even more awesome because of all the technology that the Israelis have added to it. Remember one of the things of how they water the land? They use that drip irrigation with just one drop, little by little, they irrigate the whole land. And the produce is unbelievable, unbelievable. So they talk about that some of those Canaanites were never gotten rid of from the land of Ephraim. In chapter 17, it talks about the lot that belongs to the tribe of Manasseh. And it says, now this was the lot for the tribe of Manasseh, for he was the firstborn of Joseph. To Machir, the firstborn of Manasseh, the father of Gilead, were allotted Gilead and Bashan because he was a man of war. Verse 3, however, Zelophehad, remember Zelophehad was the guy that had no sons, only 5 daughters? Yes. So Zelophehad is the son of Hefer, who's the son of Gilead, who's the son of Machir, who's the son of Manasseh. Had no sons, only daughters. And these were the names of the daughters: Mala and Noah, Ogla, Milcah, and Tirzah. They came near before Eleazar the priest and before Joshua the son of Nun and before the leaders, saying, the Lord commanded Moses to give us an inheritance among our brothers. So according to the command of the Lord, he gave them an inheritance among their father's brothers. Thus there fell 10 portions to Manasseh, besides the land of Gilead and Bashan, which is beyond the Jordan, because the daughters of Manasseh received an inheritance amongst his sons. Remember that they came to Moses saying, hey, we don't have brothers, and it's not fair to our father that we don't get any inheritance. It's not fair. So the Lord said to Moses, they're right. Give them land. So this is the first women's right thing going on, where they ask for land in a culture where basically it's all men. All the men had the dealings with inheritance, and all the men had the dealings with the family issues, and they were the ones responsible for everything. And yet, which the Lord is fair and just, you're right. There's no males in the family. So you should have as much right as anybody else because of the name of your father to continue an inheritance. Now they were told that to keep the inheritance within the tribe of Manasseh, they had to marry within the tribe of Manasseh. Why? Because the tribal inheritance could not be transferred from one tribe to another. Okay, because it has to do with a family name. Remember, that's why they say son of so, son of so, son of so, everybody's name, because everybody's important to show the lineage of inheritance. Legally, that's important. You just don't say Joe, Shlomo, or whatever, and just leave it at that. You have to give the whole genealogy because of the importance of all the generations. And in verse 12 of chapter 17, it says, okay, from verse 7 forward, it talks about all the borders of the land of the tribe from Manasseh. And in verse 14, it says, then the sons of Joseph spoke to Joshua, saying, why have you given me only one lot and one portion for an inheritance, since I am a numerous people from the Lord, whom the Lord has thus far blessed? Remember the blessing that Jacob gave to Ephraim and Manasseh, that they will be a multitude of people. So they're saying, even though they got their allotment at that time, they're thinking ahead. We're going to be more than anybody else, right? You should give us a lot more land than what we have. And if you read that in Hebrew, it says that you will be like a teeming fish. What they translate as a multitude of people in Hebrew says you will be like teeming fish. You know when fish multiply and and there's a lot of them. I don't know if you've seen sometimes just schools and schools and schools of fish. So in the Hebrew, what's translated as a multitude of people, it says teeming, you will be as teeming fish. That is why the Lord called his disciples fishers of men, because it connects that with what Yeshua said up to them. Okay, the multitude of people, fishers of men. So they're saying to Joshua, this is not enough land for us. And they say in verse 16, the sons of Joseph said, the hill country is not enough for us, and all the Canaanites who live in the valley land have chariots of iron, both those who are in Beth Shean and its towns, and those who are in the valley of Jezreel. Joshua spoke to the house of Joseph, to Ephraim and Manasseh, saying, you are a numerous people and have great power. You shall not have one lot only, but the hill country shall be yours. For though it is a forest, you shall clear it, and to its farthest borders it shall be yours. For you shall drive out the Canaanites, even though they have chariots of iron, and though they are strong. So the issue is that the sons of Joseph are saying, we need more land. And Joshua says, okay, you need more land because you're saying you're so numerous? Well, because you're so numerous, go into the forest, clear it out, and even though the people have chariots, you're going to be able to go against them. Okay, remember that having chariots meant that they were rich, that they were more wealthy. So even though they're asking Joshua, he said, Joshua comes and tells them with the same thing, with the same comment. Okay, you're so numerous, you go and clear out the land and you take control of it and you get rid of the Canaanites that live there. If you want more land, you got to work for it. Okay. So we have already that chapter 14, Caleb, 15, Judah, 16, Ephraim, 17, Manasseh. So all these four people, remember that Caleb, because he's part of Judah, is very important. He was one of the spies that walked fully with God. He was completely devoted to the Lord. Ephraim, and Manasseh, because they're the sons of Joseph that received a double portion and blessing from their grandfather. So these people are the ones that are named first. So we have Judah and Ephraim are the first ones to get land. So they're the important tribes in the sense of what the Lord is trying to say about the land and the people.
Eastern side, right?
No, this is on the west side already. The eastern side was already given. Part of Manasseh was on the east side, but most of Manasseh was on the west. Guess we had Caleb, Judah, Ephraim, and Manasseh. Now chapter 18. It says, the whole congregation of the sons of Israel assembled themselves at Shiloh and set up the tent of meeting there, and the land was subdued before them. So what they're saying is that at Shiloh is where they finally established the tent of meeting, the tabernacle. Remember, they had the tabernacle moving with them for 40 years. And once they get into the land and they start dividing given the allotments, they finally go to Shiloh, and there they set up the tabernacle, and the tabernacle was there, I think, for almost 300 or 400 years before the first temple was constructed. So for many, many years, Shiloh was the place where the tabernacle rested. Okay, the tabernacle, not the temple, the movable, the tent. So when they're there, this is what happens, that the whole congregation is assembles there at Shiloh. Verse 2 of chapter 18, it says, there remain among the sons of Israel 7 tribes who had not divided their inheritance. So Joshua said to the sons of Israel, how long will you put off entering to take possession of the land which the Lord, the God of your fathers, has given you? So in other words, these 7 tribes were procrastinating in trying to take the inheritance that belonged to them. Verse 4, provide for yourself 3 men from each tribe, that I may send them, and that they may arise and walk through the land and write a description of it according to their inheritance. Then they shall return to me. They shall divide it into 7 portions. Judah shall stay in its territory on the south, and the house of Joseph shall stay in their territory on the north. You shall describe the land in 7 divisions and bring the description here to me. I will cast lots for you here before the Lord our God. So what is Joshua saying? He's saying to these 7 tribes that still have not gotten their inheritance because they've been taking their time. He says, you guys take 3 people from each tribe, go to the land that still has not been distributed, walk over it, describe it, divide it in 7 districts or regions, and then come back to me with your description, and I will then give that land based on lots. Now remember that the lots could have been using the Urim and Tumim of the high priest. Remember the stones that were in the breastplate of the high priest to determine if a yes or a no, or to determine answers from the Lord. They could have done that, or they could have used some other format to try to find out to whom the lot was going to go, to what tribe. Okay, so they go out and they get the description, and they come back to Joshua. In verse 9 of chapter 18, it says, so the men went and passed through the land and described it by cities and 7 divisions in a book. And they came to Joshua to the camp at Shiloh. And Joshua cast lots for them in Shiloh before the Lord. And there Joshua divided the land to the sons of Israel according to their divisions. If it says before the Lord, most likely he's at the tent of meeting, and most likely it's through Eleazar, the high priest, that they're doing these lots. Okay, that's determining who gets what. Verse 11, now the lot of the tribe of the sons of Benjamin came up according to their families, and the territory of their lot lay between the sons of Judah and the sons of Joseph. So the first one to get a portion of those 7 divisions, those 7 areas that they had already looked at. And remember when they say to walk over them, by walking you were basically saying this land belongs to me. It's a way of showing that the land belonged to you once you walked over it. Okay, so the first one to get land was Benjamin. Remember, there's 7 tribes left. And then it starts describing all the borders and all the cities and everything that belonged to Benjamin. Chapter 19. Then the second lot fell to Simeon. So the next one was Simeon, who got inheritance. Verse 9, it says of chapter 19, the inheritance of the sons of Simeon was taken from the portion of the sons of Judah, for the share of the sons of Judah was too large for them. So the sons of Simeon received an inheritance in the midst of Judah's inheritance. So within Judah, the land of Judah, they gave land to Simeon because Judah was one of the tribes that got the most land. Okay, so Simeon got to get part of the land of Judah. Verse 10. Now the third lot came up for the sons of Zebulun according to their families. So the third one is Zebulun. So already we have Benjamin was the first, Simeon the second, and now Zebulun is getting the third portion of the 7 regions that they went out to walk over. Verse 17, the fourth lot fell to Issachar, to the sons of Issachar according to their families. And again, after the names, it gives you a description of all the places that belong to them. Verse 24, now the fifth lot fell to the tribe of the sons of Asher according to their families. And it gives you the list of the borders and of the cities. In verse 32, the sixth lot fell to the sons of Naphtali, according to their families. Remember that within the tribes, there's a whole bunch of families. So even though they get a big portion, then that portion has to be divided among the families. And the families that were larger got larger portions, and the families that were smaller got smaller portions. But everybody that belonged to that specific tribe had to live within that region, and so even though it was the lot was given out by Eleazar and Joshua, then the heads of the tribes had to divide that land among the families. So it was a way of doing things. It was orderly, and hopefully they didn't fight too much about, I like this place better than that place, and so. But as long as they stayed within the borders of the tribe, that was the most important thing. And then 40. The seventh lot fell to the tribe of the sons of Dan according to their families. So the last one to get within the tribes was Dan. Verse 49. When they finished apportioning the land for inheritance by its borders, the sons of Israel gave an inheritance in their midst to Joshua the son of Nun. So the last one to get a portion of land was Joshua. Like they say, the first will be last and the last will be first. So it says, the sons of Israel gave an inheritance in their midst to Joshua the son of Nun. Verse 50. In accordance with the command of the Lord, they gave him the city for which he asked, which is Timnath Serah in the hill country of Ephraim. So he built the city and settled in it. So Joshua got a piece of property within the tribe of Ephraim because he represented the tribe of Ephraim. Verse 51. These are the inheritances which Eleazar the priest and Joshua the son of Nun and the heads of the households of the tribes of the sons of Israel distributed by lot in Shiloh before the Lord at the doorway of the tent of meeting. So they finished dividing the land. Now the thing that I thought was interesting is that the last 7 tribes happened to be in Shiloh to be distributed. Now remember, Shiloh is where the tent is. 7. Do you think it's a coincidence that it's 7 tribes?
No.
Remember that Shiloh is also another name for Messiah. Shiloh is another name for Messiah. So looking in terms of prophecy, we have that at Shiloh, there's 7 tribes that still need inheritance. Remember, 7 is associated with temple. It's associated with completeness. It's associated with more spiritual completeness. So of those 7 tribes, we have Benjamin, Simeon, Zebulun, Issachar, Asher, Naphtali, and the last one is Dan, in terms of tribe. But then the 8th, what does the number 8 represent?
New beginning.
Well, new beginnings, but also has to do with a permanent state. Also infinity. So here Joshua is the 8th one. Do you think it's a coincidence? Who does Joshua represent? Yeshua. So the way I see it, Shiloh is where the tabernacle is. The tabernacle is another way of saying the presence of the Lord. Okay. There's 7 tribes plus 1. I see that as the 7,000 years, in which the last one is the year is the year of Messiah, which would be Joshua. So after the 7,000 years, we go into year 8,000. And 8,000 is the permanent state of eternity. And who else do we want to spend eternity with? Who else but Joshua? Who's Joshua? Yeshua. Another name for Yeshua. So I don't think it's a coincidence that the last 7 tribes in Shiloh at the entrance of the tent, which represents the presence of the Lord, they're distributing 7 tribes. The 8th, not the 8th one, but the last person to receive an inheritance is Joshua. He's number 8. The 8 represents permanent state. In other words, the presence of the Lord, the distribution of the land after 7,000 years, after the 1,000 years of reigning, Messiah would be year 8,000, which represent the permanent state, which is the time after the millennial reign. We go into eternity. So it has to do with Yeshua, Joshua. Joshua is the one that takes us into the land. He takes us into the promise of the Father, because remember, it's not just his word, it's his word, his land, his temple, his house, his holy mountain, and his holy people. It's all of it is one. So the importance of the land is that it's a legal recording. All this about the land is a legal document. Most of your Bibles should have a map of the tribes. If it doesn't, I highly recommend that you look it up at with Rabbi Google and look exactly the allotment of the land and how it was distributed, where each one is. Now, even though Dan is down here close to Ephraim, eventually Dan is moved further north because of when Jeroboam establishes the 2 places of worship, one in Bethel and one in Dan. Dan becomes the most northern border to avoid that people go beyond that territory to worship some other gods, and in Bethel to avoid the people going down to going to Jerusalem to worship in Jerusalem, because Jeroboam, once he becomes the king of the northern kingdom, he doesn't want the people going back to Jerusalem because he's afraid they'll unite again with Judah. Mm-hmm. So Dan starts first close to Ephraim and Benjamin, but then it's moved, part of it is moved north because of the worship centers of Dan and Bethel. And even today, when you go to, today they call it Tel Dan, they have an area where they think one of the altars was that they did worship. And one of the things that you notice that was different is that there's stairs leading to a model, kind of like a model of an altar. And the temple of the Lord never had stairs. It was common that pagan altars had stairs, but the altar of the Lord never had stairs. It always had a ramp. So that's another way of distinguishing if it was pagan or not. Pagan altars and temples always had stairs. So in a whirlwind, we did all the giving the inheritance of the tribes. Again, most of it is reading names of cities and towns and borders, which I recommend you do eventually, because not only will you be some of those names will be recognizable to you, because even today, some areas in Israel still have those ancient names that were given when the land was distributed, like Bethel and like Dan and like Jerusalem and Beersheba, and all these places. They still have those names, Hebron, and so just to have an idea. And I suggest that you try to find a map so that way you know where things were distributed. Because remember, once all this land is distributed, eventually it'll be a united kingdom under David and Solomon and Saul, and then it's divided, and you need to know where would be what part would be the north kingdom and what part would be the south kingdom. And that way you can also understand how they were captured by the Assyrians and then by the Babylonians, because it has to do with geography, the geography of the land. So again, going back to the chapters, we have that this was the distribution of the west side to the west side of Jordan. We have Caleb, chapter 14. Then we have chapter 15, Judah. Chapter 16, Ephraim. Chapter 17, Manasseh. At chapter 18, they're in Shiloh. There's 7 tribes left. They start out with the lots. The first one to get a portion of land is Benjamin, followed by Simeon, Zebulun, Issachar, Asher, Naphtali, and Dan. And even if you put these 7 tribes together, they also form a menorah. Mm-hmm. So I think it is no coincidence about these tribes, and they're all being distributed in Shiloh. Remember that Shiloh is where the tabernacle of the Lord came to be established once they got into the land. And for those of you that have been to Israel, or if you haven't, when you go, if you go to Shiloh, they have a nice museum there of things, pottery and things that they have found in that area, which testifies to that's the area where the tabernacle was, because they found a lot of broken clay dishes, and it's all around that mountain around Shiloh, around where the tabernacle should have been, because every time they had a feast, they ate. So that hasn't changed much. We all got gathered together and eat. And so after they ate, because it was clay, they would have to break the plates. And so they would leave the pieces of plate there. So they have found thousands and thousands of pieces of clay and pottery in that area. And so in the museum, one of the nice things about the museum is also they have there the prayer of Hannah. Remember, Hannah was asking the Lord for a son, and that's when Samuel was born. And that's where she went to pray for Samuel for getting a boy. So they have her prayer there, and they have a nice movie about Hannah and Samuel, and they also show you about the tribes and how they conquered the land, and how they fought for the land, and how the land was distributed. So it's a very nice, if you ever have the chance, it's a nice area. And it's very interesting, the museum and the little movie that they give you. So it's very, very interesting. So I guess we'll leave it at that, and then we'll go into questions and answers.